Hey everybody, welcome back to my book chat channel. So this is another book review. As per usual, I'm going to run through the synopsis. This is While Sleeping by Jennifer Claywood, who was nice enough to send me a physical copy to read and review, and just a big thank you out to her. Alright, so in usual fashion, we'll quickly jump through the synopsis and then go from there. You never know who's living in your house. I see you. You're casually naming your family members, mentally ticking them off one by one. I want to stop you right there. I want to ask, who's the person living in your house that you don't know? I hear you scoff, so you shake your head, but think about it. Really think about it. What lies beyond the giant grate in your kitchen? When was the last time you were in the attic? And how many of your waking hours are you spent at home? Unbeknownst to Julia Rodriguez, there is an unwelcome guest living in the house that she has recently moved into. Her new position as an assistant curator for a community youth foundation has brought her face to face with a group of girls rescued from a New York sex ring. Under a watchful eye, she struggles to face the horrors of her past and chart a new path for herself forward. As she helps these girls move on with their lives, she just might find the courage to help herself. In Ohio, a dwindling task force tracks a serial killer. John Sagan, a decorated agent with the Ohio Bureau of Investigation, has lost his family and just about his career, trying to make headway on a case that only moves when there is another murder. The killer is obsessed with skin and Polaroid pictures, leaving his victims scarred with intricate carvings with fairy tale themes. This is a dark tale that cycles between viewpoints and timelines that coalesce into an almost finished puzzle by the end. The last page takes shape. How do you think it should end? So, this one was definitely an interesting read for me. Technically, my mind just keeps going back to this one. So, jumping right in, this one this one still has been on my mind. And even though I finished it a couple of weeks ago now, I've moved on to other books, and yet I'm still finding that here and there my mind is going back to this story. Something about it just keeps pulling me back, and it could very well be because I know that a sequel is in the works, so I'm naturally very curious about how she's going to keep the story going, though I have a guess or two. So when I first started reading this book, it started off in such a different and unique way that I literally kept reading because I wanted to know more about where it was going. And therefore I was instantly drawn into the story right from the get-go. And what I mean by that is I read the first chapter, kind of got into it, and then jumped into the second chapter, and it left me going, wait, what? Little confused. So went back to the first chapter, made sure I didn't miss anything, going from chapter 1 to chapter 2, or a prologue, whatever it was, the beginning of the book. And then I went and reread the synopsis on the back of the book. I'm going, okay, that doesn't connect. So I go back to the beginning of the book, and I'm going, okay, so whatever. It runs through this brief rundown of some person's life, a little snippet, and then it just jumps into another part of the story. So it was just kind of one of those, okay, well, now I'm confused, but in such a way that it also hooked me pretty quickly. So just based on that by itself, I was hooked. So I really enjoyed all the characters that came along with the story and found myself feeling a lot of sorrow for certain characters. In some ways, for me, the bad guy was a little predictable, and it has nothing to do with the story because, it was well written. It has more to do with a lot of the fact that, unfortunately, I've read watched a lot of Criminal Minds before it ended, and with that kind of thing, I tend to recognize certain patterns and behaviors that make it a little easier for me to figure out who the bad guy really is. So it's nothing that the writer did or didn't do. It's just usually I can spot things a little fast. Don't get me wrong. Every once in a while, I'm surprised and there's a nice twist in there somewhere. But in this case, I was pretty dead on. But yeah, I felt that the transitions between people within the story was not as smooth as it could have been, but that is literally the only negative thing that I could say about this one. The story I really felt was done really well, and I felt the world building was fantastic. I really enjoyed the diversity within the story. It seemed to draw from recent events of our history surrounding around the ugliness going on within the different racial groups, especially within the USA. Yeah, I'm really looking forward to seeing what happens next in the sequel, that is to follow this one. I'd like to know more about the hero at the end of the story, and I hope it just kind of picks up from where it left off, a nice smooth transition. Because let's face it, that's not always the case, and we hate that. I think what comes back to me, though, over and over is just the sorrow that I felt for the murderer. I know it sounds funny. I felt sorry for the murderer or the bad guy within the story, right? Most people, you root for the good guy, you kind of hate on the bad guy, and you don't really think about the gray areas in between. Unfortunately, though, the product, or rather the bad guy, is sort of the product of ugly circumstances and the events surrounding his young start to his life. I actually felt my heart break a little bit for him when that part of the story was touched upon. I really had found myself rooting for him, maybe hoping that he would be able to grow up and overcome the events that he was witness to. But alas, he did not, and it's what created the murderer he turned out to be, in a rather interesting story at that. But even with that, I still find that my heart breaks and cries for the little boy that was old enough to understand, but young enough to have sucked his thumb while wishing it was all a bad dream. So, push comes to shove, it really made me feel a lot of sorrow for that little kid. And, just everything that was going on and, what led to him becoming the murderer that he ended up being. And, it's not the first time you read about those type of circumstances, but it always just makes me a little bit sad and really hope that maybe somehow they could turn it around. Just because you're, witness to some ugly circumstances or born into an unfortunate situation doesn't mean there isn't a way somewhere down the road that you could change it, be better, find a better way. But that's just, what I think. So, yeah. Yeah, like I said, and I read and reviewed this book technically a few weeks ago, and I'm only just getting to the voice bit of it now. When I first read and reviewed it, I had rated it a 4 out of 5, mostly because the transitions weren't as smooth. But, as it's been several weeks later now, and my mind is still going back to this book, and I'm still rather excited about it, even after having read it a little while ago now, I'm officially changing my review from 4 to 5. So at some point here, I'll be going back and looking for all the different platforms that I wrote the review on, and I'll be changing that star rating from 4 to 5. And I am really looking forward to seeing what happens with the sequel. So, again, I just want to give out a special thanks out to Jennifer Claywood, who was, again, kind enough to send me a physical copy of this book to review. I really enjoyed it, and we look forward to seeing what happens next. I thank you all so much for tuning in, and I will be back soon with another book review. Happy reading!